Hi, today we're going to be going over strategies to maintain cognitive load. And so this acts as a sequel to Tyler Larson's primer on cognitive load theory. So if you have not seen that first, please go ahead and watch that. The clinician educator competencies that will be covered are ETP1, teaching and facilitating learning, ETP8, the science of learning, and ETP10, which is the learning environment. Now, if you recall from Tyler's talk, we talk about working memory and what contributes to it. And there are three types of load: intrinsic load, extraneous load, and germane load. Intrinsic load is something essential to a task. Extraneous load is something not essential to a task. And germane load, which is really the hardest to describe, is the load imposed by the learner's deliberate use of cognitive strategies to facilitate learning. So a mouthful, but an example would kind of be the load imposed by trying to make a schema or come up with one in your brain. Now, remember, these are always in balance. So if the composite of these exceeds your working memory, the learning is suboptimal. And so we have to think about this equation where the intrinsic load plus the extraneous load plus the germane load are less than or equal to the working memory. And so we have to think about how we can manipulate these variables, and we're going to go over some examples. So our goal is to make space for germane load because that is where learning and mastery occurs. And to do this, we need to decrease intrinsic load and decrease extraneous load. So let's start by talking about strategies to decrease intrinsic load. So the amazing article by Young et al. That we cited in the prior talk, and in this one we're going to use again, talks about some strategies. And so the one we're going to highlight just a few within each strategy set of decreasing intrinsic load and extraneous load. So here we're going to talk about how to isolate elements. And so I'll be giving examples of what Tyler used on Twitter to kind of do this. And so Twitter, also known as X, as a function of its brevity, it requires a character limit of 280 characters. And so that actually ends up being advantageous here when teaching. So here's a tutorial I made on a morning report session at our VA. And I think one of the things that makes it tough when we do aliquots of information is that the aliquots can be too large. And that's because you can put as much information as you would like in the first aliquot. Now, Twitter actually forces you to reduce that because of the character limit. And so by chunking things out in that way, you actually are able to accommodate this information in your working memory and process it. Here are many strategies to decrease extraneous load. And so the one that I want to highlight here is something that's called transient information. And that is when you get information on one slide and you need to use it again later, but you can't really remember it all. So again, using another tutorial as an example, if you see the tweet number 2 on the left, you will see that there is a problem representation. There is a great schema by CP solvers. And then as we work our way through the case, by tweet 5, we have all of these different labs. And by tweet 5, you may have forgotten the information in tweet 2. So in tweet 6, I'm actually trying to mitigate that by bringing back transient information in the form of doing iterative problem representation. So there is a degree of synthesis that occurs there, but I'm bringing back the elements of an unremarkable exam and chest x-ray and serum markers of inflammation. The last part is optimizing germane load. And so the one that I want to talk about here a little more is called self-explanation. And so germane load is something that requires a lot of intention and deliberate practice. And so an example of that might be Tyler's tutorial on why obesity causes a falsely low BNP. And so he poses the question, why does obesity cause this falsely low BNP in patients with heart failure? And what that does is it gives the audience members an opportunity to really think about the rationale they have developed for themselves. And once they have done that, they then enter the tutorial. So again, as a reminder, the intrinsic load plus the extraneous load plus the germane load should be less than or equal to working memory to really optimize learning. And our goal is to make space for germane load. And so to do this, we should focus on strategies to decrease intrinsic load and decrease extraneous load. Here's a QR code for this fantastic reference that we have been citing for the prior session and this one.